But the very idea here is that it's so natural to be looking for fear. And we showed the data. Over half of ICD patients spend a lot of time worrying about normal test results and constantly looking for problems. You have to deliberately teach yourself to look for safety, because the detection of threat's automatic. I mean, that's hardwired in. So to find ways to calm yourself down and say, I'm okay. I know I'm a little bit frightened right now, but I'm okay. I have a medicine. I have a doctor. I have a device. I have a plan. Those are ways in which you can, in fact, get over this. So reducing ambiguity means working toward finding ways in which you're safe. I mean, push yourself to remind yourself you're safe. So how do you do that? You got to remind yourself, I am safe and strong. You know, I have been through a lot, but I'm okay. I am coping with something people haven't done before. I actually can be a survivor, not a victim. And as my data showed, at the same level, you've got to deliberately re-engage. Re-engagement means reducing ambiguity by getting back in the swing of things. So celebrating small victories, even small ways in which you make some success. And so the very idea of recognizing that positive actions, small victories, recognizing what you've done, recognizing what you've achieved, does in fact reduce ambiguity and does reduce anxiety. A second key takeaway is this idea of a team sport. Now, living with an ICD turns out to be a team sport. We've had a lot of data in the last year to tell us about this. That it turns out patients with ICDs don't do it alone. Why do we know that? Well, we have this large clinical trial that came out last month. There were 301 patients in it and partners. Half the patients got sent to a group with their partner. And every day they had access to a nurse, they had coaching and education about how to live with an ICD. But remember, the only thing that was different was both groups got the training, but the one group got the coaching with their spouse or partner with them. So they went as a team or they went as individuals. Now look what it showed. Yeah, it turns out with your patient and partner, yep, the patient reports less symptoms, less depression, more self-efficacy, better expectations. Great. Partners are great. Oh, it turns out if partners go, yep, they report less burden, a little bit more confidence, and more knowledge. Except there's one kicker, and the kicker's that last one. So who's in your team, right? Who's on the roster? By definition, this institute, your doctors, your nurses, the team who put this together tonight is saying we're part of this team. They want to be a part of this team, but you also have other things on your roster, right? You've got medications, devices, strengths, faith, beauty, community. You have a lot of things that are part of the team, and recognizing you're not in this by yourself is part of the process. So far we've learned that ambiguity equals anxiety, that ICD life is a team sport. What about when things just stink? What about when it just stinks some days? What about when you run into a limitation that really is annoying? That's grief. As a psychologist for 24 years, the hardest emotion I deal with by far is grief. Because there's no book. Because there's no single path around grief. And if you live long enough, you grieve. You just can't live this life that long without losing something or someone you love, pet to animal to human. You just can't. I wish you could, man. I wish you could. Because the hardest emotions I've ever dealt with in my own life are grief as well. Grief is stunning in its ability to recur. It's stunning in its ability to sort of circle back and get you again. You know, I call them grief attacks. But what we know from psychology is if you look at the way people deal with terrible things that happen, they consistently underrate their ability to cope and overrate the impact of problems, no matter what the problem is. If you look at spinal cord injuries or burn injuries or loss of children, consistently people say, I don't know how I'd get through that, and yet they make it. And if you think about your own life, you've been through challenges that you could not imagine. They're regretful, but they happen. So grief really is a dynamic process. And those of you who have lost somebody you love, you know what that's like, right? You deal with the fact they're not here and you miss them. Or you miss the ability to do whatever you wanted. And at the same time, you have to let go and build forward and do what you can do now. And I think that really is a profound flexibility. It's back to serenity, changing what you can and accepting what you can't. And that turns out to be hard to do. So what do we do about grief, right? I think grief involves the idea that there is need for ventilation. Being heard, being understood about emotional aspects of life really matters. But so does functional goals, getting things done also. So I'm not simply saying, let's all have a pity party. I'm saying, you know, some days we do have bad days, and yet you still got to keep moving. It's good for us to teach Sunday school. It's good for us to take a walk. It's good for us to meet somebody for breakfast. It's good for us to get up each day and have a plan. That's psychologically good for us. It puts order and meaning in our life, and that turns out to be part of how you get through grief. The nature of coping and the nature of adjusting means that we really do have to have goals for what we're trying to accomplish. We got to know why we're engaged in this challenge of living with heart disease. There's got to be a good reason. And usually it's grandkids or Calgary Flames games or stampedes. And we'll finish up tonight by talking about safety nets for a minute. I believe ICDs are the beginning of our modern history of people living with previously life-threatening diseases and relying on an implantable technology. We're seeing more and more technologies that we're going to implant in people, and people are going to live with diseases in very unique ways that could never have been dreamed of even 30 years ago. That makes you a very unique patient. You may have heart disease, but not everybody else has the ability to have a device that is both watching your heart, writing down things that it's doing, evaluating what it's doing, choosing a therapy, and providing it. Those are human characteristics. Dictation, decision-making, and therapy. It's not a bad day's work for a doctor. And yet you have it in your chest. I think that that's a safety net. Trusting a safety net means that, in fact, you believe that you're safe in the context of potential threat. Now, what we've tried to do tonight is highlight one new idea, one new strategy, because you already do cope. Nobody can implant quality of life. We can't do it. All we can implant is the safety net and the technology. The rest of the story is the strategies you bring to it. That's the achievement. Because you are sometimes dealing with a storm. You are sometimes dealing with an aftermath that's real. And the challenge is both mental and physical. The physical we're good at addressing. We know how to do that. The rest of the story is this mental part and finding ways that you can do that, like coming tonight, like reading some of these materials, like participating in this institute. These are the ways in which we really can create a stronger you.